TIFU by dating my cousin for 5 months. You hear this story millions of times of people unknowingly hooking up with their relatives and finding out about this atrocity in the most awkward ways, and mine was no exception. Even had to create a new account cause it is so embarrassing. I was talking to this guy on Hinge who had the softest of hazel eyes, and at the time, I thought he was the one. After exchanging a few messages, we decide to go on a date, and one thing lead to another, and we were a couple. We dated for about 5 months, until the horror struck us that we were relatives. Since we are both in our mid-20s, we were moved away from home and hadn't had time to meet each other's parents. Instead of doing the traditional, I'll bring you over to meet my parents, and I'll go over to meet yours, we decided for a dinner with both our parents. You can pretty much tell where this story goes now. Long story short, we took our families out to a restaurant, and when my father stood up from the table to introduce himself to my boyfriend's mother, his face turned completely white, as he was looking directly at his cousin uncle's daughter. It took her a second to realize as well. Since my family and his family live on opposite sides of the states, our parents hadn't seen each other in about 30 years. And it was coincidence that my boyfriend and I moved to the same city. We could tell something was wrong the way our parents looked at each other, and they informed us that we were related. Even though we loved each other, we decided it wasn't right to do. It was one of the hardest breakups of my life, but it had to be done for the sake of our family. I told my friends that it didn't work out and silently removed everything from social media. TLDR, dated a boy from Hinge for about 5 months, and discovered he was my cousin after our parents informed us while out to dinner. Edit, okay, too many comments about if we had zucchini. And yes, your imaginations are now filled. What was dinner like? Did you guys actually stay and have a meal? Impromptu family reunion. Let's make it a tradition. I come from a country where parents would be delighted at this revelation. Old Valyria. To quote Mean Girls, Karen, you know who's looking fine tonight? Seth Mosakovsky. Gretchen, okay, you did not just say that. Karen, what? He's a good kisser. Gretchen, he's your cousin. Karen, yeah, but he's my first cousin. Gretchen, right. Karen, so, you have your cousins, and then you have your first cousins, and then you have your second cousins. Gretchen, no, honey, nah. Karen, that's not right, is it? Gretchen, that is so not right. Second cousins aren't really that scandalous. The closest relative you share is your great-grandparents, I think. I mean, Butternut, Einstein married his first cousin. In Canada it's only illegal to marry immediate family, siblings, parents, children, grandparents and grandchildren. Cousins, aunts/uncles are all fair game. I'm sorry, that sounds like a rough situation. Even though second cousins are sometimes called kissing cousins due to the ability to legally marry, it's still a bad situation to find yourself in. Mad respect for breaking it off quietly, too. Edit for clarity, the difficulty of this situation I'm taking about is the family tension that obviously rose out of the relationship. I'm aware that second cousins are not genetically close enough to pose risks outside of families with recessive genetic disorders. Not something you'd want to have a 5-generation streak of, but once, even probably every other generation, is not going to kill the family tree. The hardest breakups are the ones over circumstance, rather than incompatibility or personal issues. Mad respect, indeed. TIFU by leaving my ear tubes in for 13 years and not realizing my hearing was going to be different when I took them out. Happened this week and I just read another user's post about breathing through one nostril and I felt inspired to share my own story. Context: I've had tubes in my ears my whole life, 24 of my 25 years. My childhood is filled with eat infections, vacuums, drops, 6 nurses holding me down as I fought them off, and surgery. I've had 5 to 8 sets of tubes in my ears. My mom and I honestly lost count because there were just too many. My last tube set was put in when I was in 5th grade, I believe. I was around 10 or 11. I've lived my entire life with them and they've never caused problems. In fact, they've helped a few times. I feel absolutely no pressure in my ears on airplanes because the tubes equalize pressure, slowing me to be fine. It's awesome. So here's where the issues started. 4 months ago I started waking up to watery ears, which for me is a really bad sign. I ignored it because at this point in my life ENT doctors give me a lot of anxiety. But the symptoms started getting worse, so last month I bit the bullet and went in. I saw the same doctor I had seen and a child. I couldn't believe he was still alive. He told me I developed a polyp on my tube and it's been in there so long he wants to remove it. I knew this day would come, so I agreed. My surgery was last Thursday and immediately post-op I realized things were off. My ear popped more times than I could count and I realize I feel air pressure now. No more carefree plane rides. My hearing was incredibly sensitive as well. Usually I blast my butternut music in my car, but now I drive around at 6 volume. And finally my voice has changed. The way I sound to myself, it's completely different to what I've come to know over the course of my life. I can't really tell if I'm whispering or shouting just yet because I've never heard this voice before and it's going to take some getting used to. Kicker is that the doctor only removed my right tube, so now my hearing feels uneven. I guess having something in my ear canal for 24 years affected my hearing. Who would have guessed? I genuinely did not. Parents, please remove your child's ear tubes before they reach adulthood. Edit, thank you for the gold. Thank you so much for the platinum. Thank you for the silver. TLDR, I've lived my entire life with tubes in my ears and they were affecting my life in more ways than I realized. My daughter's ENT says tubes shouldn't be in longer than 2 years. After a second set it's almost unheard of to do a third. The long wear tubes are only meant for 18 months to 2 years. You're totally right, my tubes shouldn't have been in for so long. After the last set the number of ear infections I got dropped, so the ear issues were kind of out of sight and out of mind. It wasn't until the polyp that we realized we goofed and should have had them removed when I was 12. I know I'm a rare case and that children don't usually get multiple sets of tubes, but I continued to get infections even with them. My ears are just flawed. Mine usually fell out on their own. I've had 7 or 8 sets of tubes and have worn hearing aids since I was 4. But I've got to say I miss my tubes. The hearing is so much better, but the doc doesn't want me to have them again cause it will just create more scar tissue. Actually feel understood. Thank you for sharing this with me. I genuinely miss my tube and the way I used to hear, but the doctor legitimately does not understand this. I have absolutely no idea what ear tubes are, or grommets skeptical. They open the ear canal to relieve pressure caused by narrow ear canals. They prevent ear infections and teach the ear to open for itself. I've never heard the term grommets before, so that is new to me too. Ah, the rare ear-teat infection. This sounds off. I sound off. TIFU by slapping my teacher's banana. So basically I was in class with one of my friends who takes the same subject. He was super energetic and always wearing semi-formal clothing. This is in my relaxed electronics class where everyone moves around and is always chatting away. So, it's Muffy Day and look over at my friend who was leaning over a desk with his coconut sticking out, while he was talking to another student. So I go up and with a huge wind up, slap his zucchini so hard that he immediately jumps up, as if he's just jumped out of his own skin. See, the problem with that was that the person I slapped was not actually my friend, but our teacher. Everyone is at a standstill, waiting for my death penalty, especially my friend who's just staring me down at this point. Now the teacher's face goes bright red, and I'm starting to freak out thinking I'm doomed. Except, the teacher just sits down, looks me in the eyes and says, "Huey, not my real name but username will do. Save that for after class," with a big grin on his face. Everyone at this point bursts out laughing as I'm sitting here absolutely cheesecake my pants thinking I was about to get kicked out of school. God, I love my teach, ha ha ha. TL, drive. I was having a good day in class, when I mistakenly slapped my teacher's cheesecake and get totally embarrassed by the comment he makes at the end of it. Nice try describing an intro to a cheesecake. Did you stay after class? Biggest unanswered question of the story. So did he give you an A or the D? A D in the B?